Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. It's been, I think, it's been like a year and a half since my last long form video. I know I said I was going to be more consistent, and clearly I lied, because I've been gone for, like 18 months? I don't really have a reason for it, unlike the popular theory that I was going into hiding because I was on the Epstein files. I was not. I made sure to take my name off of that years ago because I knew the files were going to come out eventually. But before I get arrested, let's get into the actual topic of this video, which is the Stranger Things Season 5 finale, Episode 8, The Right Side Up. Now, some of you might not know, I used to have a Stranger Things channel, Stranger Things Talk. We don't need to get into it. It was not a good channel, but Stranger Things is like my thing. I've been watching it since before Season 2 came out, so I was literally like 10 years old, 9 years old. Like, this has been my thing for so long, and I think every single season has been arguably either like a 9 out of 10 or higher. I've loved every season of it. And then Season 5, Volume 1 came out on Thanksgiving, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I think that it had some pretty great moments, mainly Episode 4. And then on Christmas, Volume 2 came out, and I was extremely disappointed. I think it's the worst thing to ever come out that has to do with Stranger Things. It was so boring, no big moments happened at all, it was just a complete waste of time and filler, and yeah, I was just very disappointed. And so going into this finale, I was very skeptical, oh my god, of what was going to happen and how they were going to stick the landing. So I went into it kind of already disappointed, and I'm glad to say that I was pleasantly surprised. I don't think this finale is anything special. I don't think it's amazing in any sense of the word, but I don't think it was bad. I have a lot of issues with it, but I also have a lot of things that I really loved about it. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about that and just my overall thoughts of the season. I'm not going to get too deep into the season yet. I'm going to save that for a different video, but I'm just going to give my overall thoughts. So the opening of the finale I thought was pretty cool. I thought it was really fun seeing all the characters kind of, split up into their little groups. We had the characters in Hawkins' lab. We had Callie, Hopper, Eleven, and Murray, and then everybody else went onto the tower, and they were going to go into the abyss. And right off the bat, I could tell that one of my main issues with the entirety of Season 5 was going to keep happening in this episode, which is the dialogue. I thought the dialogue this season was almost unwatchable. There were, like, so many scenes I was just completely taken out of it by the almost, like, Disney Channel-esque dialogue. And I'm going to get into this again later, where we've had, like, multiple scenes this season where everybody is just like, oh, like, yes, me too, me too, me too, me too. We had that with the Will coming out scene, which I loved that scene. It was a great scene, but it just felt really awkward at the end of it when everybody is like, oh, like, me too. And then when Eleven dies, we have all the characters, like, I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe. It was just very repetitive dialogue. And then, not to count all the times that they made plans, and the dialogue in those scenes were always just so repetitive. But while some of the dialogue was pretty bad, some of it was also amazing. With, this Hawkins lab kind of group with Hopper and Eleven mainly, we got, I think, like 3 speeches back to back to back that were all really amazing. It was Eleven being like, you can't take me out, like, no matter what. And then we had Hopper's speech being like, telling Eleven that she doesn't have to die. Like, do this for, the days when she has a kid. Do this for the days when this is all over. That scene, I think, was the best scene in the entire episode. And then we have Eleven's speech saying, no, like, you have to let me go. You have to let me do my own thing. You have to trust me. And that scene was also great. So there were some really amazing scenes with some really amazing dialogue. It was either amazing dialogue or it was just really poor, just like bad writing. And with this Hawkins group, we also got some pretty fun scenes. I think, again, my favorite scene in the entire season, aside from the ending of episode 4, was Hopper and Vecna's scene, where Vecna is basically just tormenting the shit out of Hopper. And it is so messed up. He's just making fun of him for, the death of his first daughter, and then now he's, like, making him think that he shot Eleven, which, by the way, was insane. I thought they were gonna go the route that he actually did shoot Eleven, and I was like, there's no way they're gonna make him be like, I just killed another one of my daughters. Like, it was the most messed up thing I've ever seen in this show, and I loved it. And then we have the scene with Eleven and the military guards where she's snapping all their necks, and then she gets the gun and she forces the guy to shoot himself. Insane. So yeah, I basically loved everything that came from that Hawkins lab group, especially when Callie dies. That was my amazing scene. Also, I feel so awful for that actress. She has been in every, like, lowest rated Stranger Things episode ever, and people are so mean to her. It's not her fault, obviously. If the character is bad, the character is bad, but it's not the actor's fault. People need to stop. But now going over to the main group with all of the other kids, I thought their scenes were very good, but I also thought a lot of it was just really weird. We have the Steve fake out death, which if you believe that, I don't even know what to tell you. He was obviously not going to die that early on. I personally think they should have ended Volume 2 off with that scene, with Steve hanging on. I feel like that would have built suspense up, and it just would have left off on a much better spot than what we left off on in Episode 7, with just that Will coming out scene. Again, great scene, but it just didn't feel like it set up anything else after that. But the Steve fake out death scene was interesting. I like how Jonathan saved him. I thought that was really fun. But how possible is that? It's not possible at all. That makes no sense. How he'd be able to catch him. But then we see the group go into the abyss, and we see them going to Vecna's lair, and we basically find out that, this lair is actually just the Mind Flayer. It's his, physical body. And let me just say, the design of the Mind Flayer, I struggled with it for a little bit. I wish they kind of went the route of Stranger Things Season 3, and they just made, that monster just, 10, 20 times bigger, and just made him look like that. But I am pretty happy with the design we got. He looks very menacing. It's insane. And I don't know how any of our characters even survived this. Because this dude is how many, like a skyscraper? But then we see their battle and we see them fighting the Mind Flayer. And, they're basically getting their ass beat. And just running for their lives. And then 11 shows up looking awesome. And then we have arguably another one of the best scenes in the entire episode. Where she jumps over and opens his stomach up and flies through to Vecna. And speaking of Vecna, I just need to say, Jamie Campbell Bower deserves every single award that he could possibly be awarded, because his performance in not just Season 5, but in his entire show, Season 4 and Season 5, but especially Season 5, his performance is one of the best performances I've seen in a TV show ever. His scenes as Henry, I originally thought were going to be very boring, but just his acting just elevates this character so much, and he is no doubt the best actor in this entire show, and I would love to see a spin-off show of just him. Every scene in the cave, when he's telling Will, leave me alone, or when he's seeing his younger self, get infected with, the Mind Flayer. It's just, the acting is just so amazing, and it's just so, it's mind-blowing. Give him an MCU, a DCU role, I don't care what they are, just give him a main character role. But then we get to the big fight against the Mind Flayer, against Vecna, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit disappointed. I think somebody timed it, and this fight scene was only 5 minutes long in the entirety, and I don't know if it's just me being greedy, but I feel like your final fight with, the big bad that you've been building up for 10 years should be a little longer than 5 minutes, especially when there's an hour-long epilogue after this. I feel like you could have shaved off, maybe 20 minutes or even 10 minutes of the epilogue and, added that on to this fight. But I'm not going to complain too much. It was an awesome fight, and I'm happy we got it in the first place. And then the way that fight ended with, Joyce coming in and chopping off Vecna's head and just seeing all these characters have these flashbacks of, everything that Vecna and the Mind Flayer have done to them. Amazing scene. 10 out of 10 scene. I am so happy that they ended it off that way with these characters. But again, I just wish the fight was a little bit longer, but the way it ended, fantastic. And then I remember after this, I saw that there was still an hour left, and I was like, there's no way that this is over. Something has to happen. And then I realized that Max was found by, the military in the radio station, and I was like, shit's about to get real. And I'm going to be so honest, when they were driving back to, the gate, I was so convinced that Murray was just going to get shot in the head or something insane like that. Unfortunately, they just used some spike traps and basically trapped the group. And it was at this moment that I knew 11 was 100% going to sacrifice herself and stay in the Upside Down. They've been leaving little crumbs, and not even little crumbs, they've been leaving whole meals about it. I mean, Callie literally said, you should kill yourself because all this stuff is going to happen to your friends, which, insane, by the way. But unfortunately, we see that 11 is going to sacrifice herself. We see her in the Upside Down. We see this scene of her and Mike in the Void, which was an amazing scene. I loved it so much. But, just seeing all of these characters' reactions to 11 sacrificing herself was just heartbreaking. Purple Rain playing over the scene, amazing. An amazing scene and an amazing send-off to this character. And another thing that I noticed is it's so funny to me that, the main villain of this show is just, the humans. The monsters are obviously monsters, but the main monsters are the humans. If you look at it, they caused all of this to happen. They caused 11 to get her powers. They took away her childhood, and then they're the ones that caused her to die. They made her sacrifice herself. So the real villains aren't even, Vecna and the Mind Flayer. Obviously they are, but in my opinion, the government and the humans are the bigger villains in this show. At least to our main group. And then we cut to 18 months later, where we see a lot of the group in a good place. They're about to graduate, and they're kind of getting their lives back on track. But we see Mike is still having a very hard time dealing with, what happened. He just can't accept what 11 did. And then we get this beautiful scene between Hopper and Mike, where Hopper's basically like, you don't have to like it, you don't have to appreciate it, but you just have to learn to accept it. And, you know, that's basically what Hopper did. And that scene, you know, brought me to tears. It was just a beautiful scene, great acting in that scene. And then we kind of move over to the kids graduating. We move over to their graduation, and we get this interesting speech by Dustin. You know, not a great speech. I thought it was really cool that he was, you know, kind of homaging what Eddie said in season 4. And for that, I really appreciated it. I just think it went on a little bit too long, and it was just a little bit too, you know, like Disney Channel-esque with like the confetti and everybody clapping and cheering. I thought it was a little silly, but overall, great scene. And then we get the final send-offs of all of these characters. First, we start off with the older kids. We start off with Jonathan, Nancy, Steve, and Robin. Their scene, I thought, was a little odd. It just felt like these characters have only been apart for, what, maybe like a year, and they're already acting like complete strangers. You know, I have friends that are away at college, and when they come home, we don't act like that. And it just, like, it felt like they were acting like they've been apart from each other for like 35 years, when it's only been probably less. So that scene felt a little bit odd. But then we go over to, you know, our main group: Mike, Will, Dustin, Lucas, and Max. And this scene was just like perfection. I love that they ended the show the same way they started it, you know, with the sprinkler shot of Mike's front yard, and then we go and see them playing D&D. And then we get this like really beautiful scene of Mike, you know, being the storyteller that he is, basically showing us what these characters' futures are going to look like, you know, in like by telling us a story. We see Max and Lucas kind of settle down in Hawkins and, you know, hopefully get there happily ever after. We see Will going off and growing into the person that he is. And then we see Dustin going off to college, being a nerd, you know, but still spending time with Steve and just, you know, growing into who he is. And then we see that Mike is going to become a writer, which was very Stephen King-esque. I thought it, you know, reminded me a lot of Stephen King, how he makes all of his characters writers because, you know, he's a writer and he sees himself in all of his characters. It reminded me a lot of like a Stephen King ending. And then we get one of the final scenes, which is a very controversial scene. I don't really see why, but it's basically Mike, you know, telling this story about Eleven and about how he thinks that she could still be out there alive. Me personally, I don't think that she's alive. She's definitely dead. It makes no sense how she would get away, but I really love that these characters, you know, are holding out hope and just have, you know, like Mike just basically saying, I believe in this, is his way of accepting it, and I think it's really beautiful. But yeah, then we get this really emotional scene of all the kids kind of walking out of the basement and, you know, closing the chapter, you know, on this entire show. They one by one, they go up the stairs. And I've heard, and, you know, watching all the behind the scenes stuff, these are all real tears. These are not, you know, acting tears. We've seen them cry like this before in, you know, seasons like season 3 and 4. But like these tears just felt so genuine. And you could tell that like they are like honestly heartbroken to say goodbye to this, like these characters. And then it ends off with Mike being the last one in the basement, walking up the stairs, and then seeing Holly and all of her friends run down and play D&D, and, you know, kind of passing the torch on to a younger generation. And I thought it was an amazing way to end the episode. So I've been yapping for probably, like 20 minutes at this point. This is probably not a very coherent video. I just kind of wanted to, like, share my thoughts, just kind of get everything out, because I've been, like, kind of contemplating to make this video or not, and I wanted to. So overall, season 5 was not my favorite. I honestly think it's my least favorite season in the entire show, but it had, you know, some great moments, especially in this last episode. Overall, I'd give the episode probably a 7 or an 8, maybe 7.5, 8, like 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I had some issues with it, but overall, an amazing send-off to these characters and this show that I've loved for, you know, the past like 8 or 9 years. But thank you guys for watching. I promise that I'm going to be posting more videos. I've really missed doing this, but, you know, just things happened in my life, and I just wasn't feeling it anymore. But I'm back, and I really want to make more videos. I've been making a lot of shorts recently, and I appreciate the love on those. But make sure to look out for more videos in the future. And for the last time, remember, friends don't lie.